write me, it is December 1st, and I have just finished reading what is probably the book that has taken me the longest for the shortest amount of pages, and that is Italo Calvino's Why Read the Classics, originally written in Italian, translated by, I just remembered his name, Martin McLaughlin. This thing is less than 300 pages and it's taken me probably a month to read this. This book I got for either my birthday or for Christmas. Had to have been 2 or 3 years ago, I think. And I started trying to read it relatively shortly afterwards, and then stopped and gave up on it, and then restarted again. I think I actually started reading this before I was reading Paradise Lost. The reason why it took me so long to read, as well as to just really firmly enjoy, is because this is a collection of essays written by Italo Calvino, who is a pretty well-renowned Italian literary critic. So it's a collection of literary essays that, you know, my thinking of what occurred here is that my sibling got this from me looking at probably the first essay as well as the title. And the first essay is very much based on like this, okay, why do we read the classics? Why are the classics important? And then from that point on, it is, I mean, it's 300 pages of literary essays. And so I initially had started trying to read it just as I would any other work, and that was not working. I was doing everything I could to avoid reading. And so then I moved it to being my book that I kept with me in the event that, like, I finished another book, so I would read, like, I would finish that book, and then I would, you know, have some time to read like 2 or 3 essays in this book, or in this collection. It eventually became just kind of like my downtime book of, I have 30 minutes, let's read another essay, kind of deal. Another reason why it became so difficult to read, as well as just like not wanting to work with it all that much, is because there's a lot of these essays are about books and authors that I have not read and I don't have any experience with. Because one of the very important things to note is that he's an Italian literary critic, and so there's so much of his stuff that is about Italian authors or French authors or Spanish authors that I just don't have any connection with, because they're considered classics in that region or in that area or for that literary tradition, but not in America, right? And so it was a lot of, all right, let's read something about someone that I have no idea who it is, about a piece of literature that I have no idea what it is. And so it's a lot of figuring out those things as well at the same time as reading this, right? So yeah. With that being said, this collection certainly did give me a lot of new authors to go and look at, new pieces to go and look at. So yeah. I don't really even want to really focus that much on the major essays here, because there's so much of it that I cannot fully critique or understand or talk about, because so much of it is based around stuff that is commentary on things that I have no commentary on, right? So that's kind of like the first step in this. And so really I think that the first, or at least the major thing to look at, is the first essay of why read the classics, which really is a breakdown in which Calvino tries to give 14 different definitions for how we define classics and like important literature. And you know, some of them are more like colloquial definitions, right? And then eventually we get to kind of like definitions that are presentable and workable. And so like the first thing that he starts off with is that classics and classic literature are the books that everyone says they are rereading, never reading for the first time, right? Which is more of a commentary on and a colloquial definition of people and how people are, because it is something that is like, for a great number of people, right, that posit themselves as being an academic, or being someone who is smart, or being someone who's well versed and well read, that admitting that they don't know something, especially something that is considered to be a classic or something that's considered to be important, is considered embarrassing, right, in some way. And so, right, these are the books that you never hear about someone reading it for the first time. It is always that they are rereading it as an adult. And so that kind of, he starts off with that definition and then kind of works backwards from there to get to the 14th definition, which is that classic literature and the classics are pieces of literature that exist as background noise no matter what the present is, right? And that is, I think that's a much more workable definition, because it helps define that classic literature and important literature are pieces that can get built off of in some way, which is of course super important, right? But it also helps us define that like classic literature doesn't necessarily have to be the smartest literature in the world, right? Of where, like, you know, the Agatha Christie's and the and Hercule Poirot and Sherlock Holmes, right, are should be considered classic literature in terms of the English and American lexicon and literature, because they influence so much of entertainment, really, and how we build things. That doesn't mean that they have to be the best examples of detective fiction in the world. No, they don't. And oftentimes they're not, right? But they should be considered classics because they become these massive touchstones and building blocks for other genres and other mediums for this genre, right? So yeah. There's so much of this that went over my head, and that's, you know, that's okay. You know, I'm allowed to be an idiot every once in a while. But yeah, that is Italo Calvino's Why Read the Classics.